Just a quick check if I'm audible.
Yeah, hi, I can hear you now.
Yeah, hi. Apologies for the technical delay. So we welcome you all. It's a pleasure to host Mr. Prantik Mazumdar today with us. He will be talking to us on the topic digital innovation for India to champion in the coming decade. We welcome you, sir, to the Genesis 2021. Prantik is an entrepreneur and venture investor and acts as a digital transformation catalyst in organizations to drive change, growth, and impact. He is serving as a board member for TI Singapore. After graduating from NUS, he kickstarted his career with the Singapore government to drive international trade promotions for the country. He started his entrepreneurial journey with Happy Marketers in 2011, where he spent a decade scaling up one of the most awarded independent digital marketing services firms. Before a successful exit to Dentsu International, he is a regular columnist, and in 2015, he was recognized as one of the top 50 most influential marketers in the world. Thank you, Prantik sir, for agreeing to come here. I'm sure everyone will be well benefited from your session. Just before we start the session, I would like to play a small video of our sponsors, Hiring. So just enjoy the video. Prantik sir, I would like to invite you to start the session. We will see this video from our sponsors in the end of the session. The stage is yours, sir. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, and good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Prantik. Uh, I currently live in Singapore, and it's obviously a huge privilege for me to address the audience today and take you through my perspective on what sort of innovation opportunities that we might see in India, or hopefully what many of us might be able to create or co-create together. I'll allow me to share my screen. I have. Could you please allow me to share the screen?
Yes, sir. You can try now, sir.
Sure. All right. Is my screen visible? All right.
Yes,
I
sir.
take it that all right. I take it that my screen is visible. So yes, over the next 35, 40 minutes, what I would like to do is just give you a perspective of where we are as a digital economy, what strides have we made, what are some of our strengths, at the same time, what are some of the gaps? Because I think I genuinely believe as an entrepreneur and investor that it's the gaps where the opportunities lie in the future, right? So obviously as a country, we've it's 75th year of our independence, and we have made some massive strides. Perhaps some of these have been perpetuated and accelerated because of COVID in a weird way. But I think there still is a massive opportunity for all of us, and I especially to the student community, I submit that as you all graduate and as you all move on, I think not only is there an opportunity to kind of participate and partake and join companies that are revolutionizing various aspects of life in India, but at the same time to create opportunities. I think that's the power of entrepreneurship, and I think India is supremely well poised to kind of leapfrog and make some massive innovations that can change life for the better, right? So I'll give you my perspective, but on the whole, I think where I see the next coming decade, hopefully there is a lot of growth, which is inclusive, which is indigenous, which is obviously very, very innovative, which has a massive impact. I'll give you a 2-minute overview of my life, so you'll get a bit of a context about my journey thus far. I think you probably shared a lot about my in terms of my professional journey, But just in terms of, overall, where do I come from? So obviously, I was born in Kolkata. I spent my childhood in Pune, and then my family moved to Indonesia, and I've been a resident in Singapore for the last 20 years. Today, I happen to, be part of the Dentsu Group, but for about 10 plus years, I was an entrepreneur myself, and I, built a pure services company, not a venture-backed company, pure services, where, we genuinely believe that client revenue was probably the best form of funding that one could get. And we grew that company to over $10 million organically, and then we sold it to Dentsu. My background is in computer engineering, and as part of my role as my job, I've had the good fortune of working with large multinationals, large local government entities, as well as venture backed startups from Southeast Asia and India as well. And today, apart from my day job at Dentsu, I'm an active angel investor as well as advisor and mentor to various startups across Asia Pacific. So that's a bit about myself. So, over the last 20 years, I've started my career with the Singapore government, actually helping a lot of Singapore companies internationalize. So I think that gave me a good perspective of how governments can proactively shape ecosystems, shape industries. And Singapore is obviously one of those good cases where the companies succeed in spite of the government, right? Not despite of the government. And thereafter, I worked for a couple of tech startups, marketing startups, one in Singapore, one from India. And thereafter, I was an entrepreneur myself. And today, I'm investing and advising. So, but pretty much 20 years of my life has been very much around startups, whether product led or service led. But the goal has been about entrepreneurship, value creation, job creation, right? Hopefully, that will put some of my thoughts into perspective. And as I kind of go ahead and present, feel free to either interject me or put your questions or comments on chat. Else, we can have a discussion at the end of my presentation. So this is what the host was talking about is, we sold our company to actually an American brand called Merkle, which is part of Dentsu. So it was a pretty interesting moment where, one grew a business and then eventually one got to partake in an opportunity to kind of exit, so to speak, and become part of a larger entity to accelerate growth. All right. Now let's quickly talk about, where do we stand today? Some sort of a digital scorecard, right? It's been 75 years of, of independence. Obviously, as many of you might know or have read, in the first 3-4 decades, obviously, bulk of our, economy was very, very centrally planned and government led. And there's probably a lot of literature around, growth being fairly probably fairly mediocre if one could look at it from a purely GDP perspective. We grew at about 2 to 4% for the first 3-4 decades. Obviously, a lot of things changed post 91 as India opened up. Obviously, post 2000, where I think the BPO revolution, the IT services revolution, some of the big companies like TCS, Infosys, Wipro, I'm sure a lot of our friends and family would have worked in those companies. And we have enjoyed growth that was services led. So what was earlier manufacturing then became services, and now we are very much in the product and entrepreneurship led growth, right? But when I look at India today, when I look at from a remote objective lens, I see two. From a digital perspective, I see two things that make me very, very proud, right? Of course, every other day you open any sort of media and you will read about unicorns, right? So on the left, you see pretty much these are very, very familiar logos. They're in the media, in the news every day. Just this year alone, in 11 months, we've added 40 odd unicorns. In total, we have 70 unicorns, and that's massive, right? So if you look at the unicorn logos, these are just a handful, but you will find that there are services across edtech, fintech, some consumer web startups, e-commerce, of course, some healthcare startups that's coming up, and that's amazing. These are venture-backed, multi-billion-dollar enterprises which are all poised for growth. They're in a stage where profitability is not what they're looking for. They are really looking for growth at the cost of kind of diluting equity. But that's the product-led, venture-led growth, and that's massive. That's creating jobs, that's changing our daily lives. From a consumption perspective. So if you look at that industry in 2020 stood at about 80 odd billion, and it's poised to grow at about 10x by the end of 2030. If you look at a RedSeer and a BCG study, that's likely to be close to $1 trillion in itself, and which is amazing. I think hats off to all the entrepreneurs and angel investors and local and global VCs who are kind of fueling that growth, right? But if you look at it, I think most of these are about convenience, about consumption. and that's great, right? That's also one perspective. The other part, which I think it's important to look at, because India is still 70% agrarian, right? We have 600,000 villages. So I think whilst many of these consumption-led startups are also reaching tier 3, tier 4 cities, I think what's also good to see is that there are certain government or civil servant-led efforts which are bearing fruit. I mean, today UPI, right? Any payment that you make, that's again led through UPI. Obviously, Aadhaar has been a game changer. We also have healthcare services, the MyGov chatbot that kind of, or Arogya Setu, which played a big role during the second wave of our COVID crisis, and various others, right? Obviously, this is not perfect, but the point is, I think there are, when I look at the digital scorecard, you have the consumer web, private equity led unicorns and tech startups, which is amazing. You also have product services startups which are doing very, very well. At the same time, I think there's a huge amount of push top down, and there's a lot more to be done. But I think from a scorecard perspective, these are two things to bear in mind when we look at India and look at where the opportunities lie ahead. So I'm going to quickly talk about it as from my perspective, 10 unique digital opportunities for India in the coming decade. And in some of these, there are already companies and startups, in tier 2, 3, 4 cities that are already kind of creating opportunities. And some I think are really, really big gaps. At least I haven't heard of companies doing much. And hopefully collectively after our session, happy to hear if you guys know if there are any startups kind of doing work in that space. So what are some of those opportunities, right? Because if you noticed, my title was, I think, hopefully in the next 10, 20 years, it's not just about solving for ride hailing or online travel or, delivering biryani at a cheaper price. I mean, those are important, but I think those are consumption led. Those are very much around desires and wants. I think there is still a massive opportunity to not just do good, but do good at the same time of making economic impact, of creating jobs as well as making money, which is about basic needs, fundamentals of life within India. Hopefully, there will be entrepreneurs looking at it, and there already are, like I said. And before I get to those 10 ideas, I think this chart to me blew me off. This is from the World Economic Forum. It basically captures a unique differentiator for India across, if you compare even versus a China, which is developing, at the same time, the larger Western countries. It's the working age population. And to me, this could be a silver bullet, or to me, this could be a liability. Either way, this is an asset or a liability depending on how we use it. 90 million people, youth, joining the workforce in the next decade. I mean, this is equal to the population of various countries. I mean, Singapore, where I live, it's 5 million, right? Philippines, Vietnam, that's the size of the population. 100 million is a very, very sizable number. And this is 100 million youth joining the workforce, probably in the age bracket of 18 to 25. Now, how we handle this, how we accommodate them, how do we give them opportunities, how do we leverage them, is going to decide where India lands up in, from a socio-economic indicator. I have no doubt that as a country, as an economy, we'll hit that $10 trillion mark. But I think to me, the worry is the socio-economic indicators. Today, if you compare India, even with SAARC countries, compared to, let's say, even a Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, I think on various socio-economic indicators, India is actually lagging behind. So at one end, our stock market is booming, our startups, we have unicorns, but on the other hand, I don't think the growth is equitable, right? I think that's where I think bulk of the opportunity lies, and I think the answer will be on how do we kind of tackle this 90 million. So opportunity number one, talking about people, is really upskilling or providing vocational training to make youth employable. I think we have a fundamentally very robust education system, but I think many of us many of us perhaps would agree is, I think it is still elitist. I think it is still very much around academic. I think we need to figure out that, how do we make access to education equitable? Why can't every single child in the country have access to the same level of basic primary education, if not secondary high schooling education? And B, how do we ensure that that education is not just bookish and academic, but there is an avenue for that education to lead to basic fundamental jobs? Many of us who are privileged to go to the IITs, IIMs, or NUSs, or Manipals, etc. I mean, I'm not talking of that population. That population is very privileged, because meritocracy, whilst it is very good, it is also questionable, because meritocracy only works if the starting point is equitable, right? And unfortunately, in India, the starting point, and for most of us who are on this group, I think, life, nature, God has probably rolled the dice in the right way, and hence we have access to a lot more than what most students and youth have. And I think this is a massive, massive opportunities. I think in the BPO phase, in the IT services phase, a bit of that happened, but I think a lot more needs to happen. And I see, a few startups kind of trying to do this, right? Obviously, we have the Byju's and the Unacademies, etc., but a lot more needs to be done. So, for example, there's a startup in Delhi, Bombay called Unlu. There is My Captain, where they're trying to obviously tier one, but also go down to grassroots to basically provide skill sets, education, which people can use to get internships and jobs, right? At least there is a thought process or a path saying, it's not enough to just get a certificate and I say I have a graduate. That needs to be monetized. So I think what these guys are doing, so Unlu, Front Row, Bit Class, they're celebrity-led education. My Captain is led by people from the industry, but the goal is same, is how do I teach you skills? Could be writing, could be singing, could be dancing. The creator economy is booming thanks to Bitcoin, thanks to cryptocurrencies. How do we kind of, so we have to think very, very differently. It can't be the same level of jobs or the same category of jobs. In fact, there's another startup in the north called Exampur, which is trying to figure out how do we get, folks from the villages to prepare better for UPSC and civil services. So I hope we see more of that, where not only is there practical vocational upskilling training provided to youth as well as middle-aged people who are looking to reskill themselves, but also how do we create jobs? How do we ensure that they have some avenue to kind of transport that certification into some sort of economic opportunity? So that's opportunity number one for me. Number two is again taking that employable youth, once you've kind of made them employable, giving them access to global opportunities. India alone may not be able to create those opportunities just within India. And I think in the digital world, it doesn't need to, right? I think if our skill sets are good, if our attitude is good, obviously we have the language, the same advantages that helped India in the BPO generation. Today, I think thanks to technology, whether it's, whether someone wants to code for the world remotely, whether someone wants to, record songs, whether someone wants to write stories, or someone wants to be a digital journalist, a accountant, whatever skill sets it may be, we need to figure out a mechanism to connect the employable youth with global opportunities. And I've just noted a couple that I kind of know of. Get Creator, for example, a lot of the youth in India are benefiting from the gig economy, where they are sitting in India at the comfort of their home or wherever else, and they're basically working with brands, marketers, etc., to provide design, creative marketing services through Get Creator, which essentially is a marketplace matching talent with opportunity. Same with Pratilipi. I think many of you would know, people can write and create stories for the world, and in fact many of those are also being used by the Disneys and Netflixes of the world, and they get paid in royalty. And I'm sure a lot, this is just creative skill set, right? But I think anything that can be delivered digitally, it could be healthcare, right? Anything that can be delivered digitally, I think there's an opportunity for company to kind of come and create a platform to connect employable youth to global opportunities. Number three, very close to my heart, my wife's a doctor, is remote digital access to primary healthcare. And it's not just about the practice of the world where you can, or nightingales, where you kind of get nurses for home or doctors. I think we have to figure out that, again, if we have 600,000 villages, how does someone sitting, in a remote corner in Nagaland have the same quality of access to a doctor or a nurse? Even for basic primary, sure, when you need access to a hospital, either the mobile ambulance or the hospital can come to you, or you have to figure out a way to airlift or whatever and get them to the hospital. But I think a lot of basic healthcare can either be automated or digitized. And I'm seeing this happen, for example, in Singapore. I don't think during the last 2 years, for basic cough, cold, stomachache, etc., I've visited a doctor. There are companies like White Coat or Doctor Anywhere. And I'm sure in India, there are a few examples where it's basically, the doctor is sitting in their chamber, he or she is accessed through technology. Again, it's not very complicated. It's just someone's had the idea and someone's made it into a nice digitized healthcare service. The idea again is, and it has many benefits. One is, of course, access that people in remote corners get, in a fast, quick, cost-effective manner. But also, it also solves problem for queuing. If you start thinking about it, there are indirect benefits. You're also solving the problem of traffic in a way, right? So I think wherever possible, I think your first level of service, I think a lot of it can be digitized, and it has numerous benefits. direct and indirect. So to me, this is another massive opportunity for someone to take a look at it. This, I think, probably is one of the most concerning areas for India. If you read a story from The Economist in 2020, India, I think, is amongst the lowest in the world, and it pains me to say this. I think India's women workforce levels are dropping at a rapid pace. And what's sad is that, and this is across levels, by the way, so it's not just about rural women. So I think that imagery is quite, in that sense, quite misleading. That, oh, only women in the villages have to stay back because their families don't allow them to work, etc. This is actually more of an urban problem. And if you look at that study, there are a couple of charts which are very, very troublesome. Is women in India are getting access to education. Many of them are graduating with great marks, or with degrees, bachelor's to PhD, but either right after graduation they're not getting opportunities, or probably what you would guess is post marriage or post if they choose to have a family, they're not coming back to work. And this is a huge problem, and it can be solved at various levels. Either existing companies have to have far women friendly policies, because obviously till date in most countries women still do, which is still not fair, but women still do kind of bear the brunt of most of the housework, which means they need fairer access, they need better flexible policies. And I think one is about those companies getting, introducing policies that are women friendly, but also there can be opportunities to kind of capitalize on women entrepreneurship. And I'll give you an example in a different point in a bit. So women entrepreneurship, or accessing women talent remotely, there has to be an opportunity, because I think there are countless studies which will show us that it is just the right thing to do. India finally has more women per capita than men. So fundamentally, if women are not employed, it's not going to help the economy grow. But there are many studies which show that if the woman earns, families, that the level of opportunity and economic growth for families improve. It has positive benefits on children. It's a virtuous cycle. But if you don't tackle this, it's a vicious cycle. So this is something massive. Someone has to take a look at this as a unique opportunity. Opportunity number 5. Sorry for the graphic image there, but this is a massive challenge. Sanitation. Because, and I'm talking of public sanitation, right? Basic access, as well as the cleanliness of sanitation. And this, again, if you see overseas, I think probably the best example one would get is in Japan. It's a cultural thing that in Japan you just can't find a dirty toilet, because just culturally, kids right from preschool are taught that when you use a toilet, you're going to clean for the next person. In fact, you might have come across videos on social media where kids in preschool are taught from that level that every day they have to themselves clean their schools, not just the toilet, but schools. So there's a cultural thing which unfortunately doesn't, we can talk about it, historically our culture, kind of teaching us to be clean, etc. But today, I think it's safe to say that at least doesn't manifest in most cities or most villages. So providing toilets is one thing, but also ensuring sanitation, because this has a massive healthcare and productivity issue. So, for example, there's a new startup in Pune and Bangalore called Hachimichi. Again, he's sought his inspiration from Japan. Again, he's not solving for creating new toilets, but what he's solving for is sanitation of toilets. So what you essentially see is that that particular device that on the right bottom side gets retrofitted on any normal commode. And what happens is, with a sensor, if you put your arm or hand, there's a clean biodegradable plastic toilet seat that comes out. And he's already installed this in Goa, Bangalore, Pune, in spas, bars, restaurant, because those are public toilets, and that's where he's piloting. Soon he's speaking to large corporates for office toilets, for airports and railways as well. Because it's high time we kind of solve for this, because it also changes the imagery of the country when for tourists, right, for investments. So this is an area which is, again, something basic, but needs to be fixed, and I think there is a entrepreneurial opportunity there. Number 6, I think engaging our population in public policy and politics. This again, it's been happening to some extent. I think there are certain pockets, certain think tanks that have come about. But I think there is massive opportunity here, because, again, being a democracy, I think if our institutions need to be strengthened, we can't, especially the youth, I think we have horrendous voting participation rates. But I think at the same time, we are very active on social media and digital to kind of vent and complain. Now, sure, it's our democratic right to dissent and vent and complain, but I think that also means there's an opportunity. If not, the same venting, if there can be constructive opportunities through communication channels to either formulate policy or comment on policies or political manifestos. There's a lot of work, I must say. There are a lot of new age political scientists or new age think tanks that are trying to engage the citizen. But I think it has to go far broader and deeper. And this is where I think the youth of the country, or doesn't have to be the youth, anyone, I think we need to be able to have a unified, collective, constructive voice, not just to dissent or to give constructive criticism, because that's the easy part. That, hey, this is wrong, or this sucks. But what are we going to do about it, right? And I think various other countries, I think even countries like Estonia, I think a lot of their policies are actually citizen driven. For example, if today someone has an idea saying, how we need to use blockchain or DeFi or cryptocurrency to solve a problem, I think today India is going through an interesting phase of policy making in that phase. So what do we do about it, right? Or maybe all of us have certain perspectives on laws when it comes to criminal laws or corporate laws or PILs. I think there should be a mechanism to kind of collectively use our brain power to shape policy and politics. Again, I haven't really come across some notable startups, hence I have not mentioned here, but to me, this is an opportunity. Making renewable energy the norm. I think India has done very well, I think, relatively speaking, compared to many countries. But of course, as a growing economy, I think, at COP26 recently in Stockholm, PM Modi has laid out a plan for the next 50, 60 years. That's still very long, but again, understandable. I think we are taking steps. I think we have some fundamental steps of kind of hitting 500 gigawatts of power generation in this decade, which is already a mammoth goal. But to me, I think what's amazing is the change that's happening, and it's happening not just by the government, but by entrepreneurs and women entrepreneurs. And this is also, this point cuts across the women employment point I was trying to make earlier. So the logo that you see is of a company called Durga Energy, a fabulous story of how a rural woman decided one fine day in Rajasthan that she's going to basically take up the project of electrification for her village. Because as you can imagine, as many of you may have seen in the Swadesh movie, that when a bulb lights, it has a massive ramification for kids to be able to study at night. Productivity increases, people can work, people can study, people can consume entertainment. So I think electrification, and I think that's where India is doing quite a good job when it comes to solar. There's some good case studies of wind as well, and I think we are seeing the EV revolution take stage in urban India. I think a lot of companies are looking to kind of, especially delivery vans. I hear of a couple of startups in Bombay, Delhi, who are basically working with the Zomatos and the Farm Eases and Burger Kings to convert their fleet into electric vehicles. Each small little thing makes a difference. But to me, I think, each of these points that I'm making, I think the opportunity is to look at them holistically, right? So the women element, I think, can be juxtaposed with various other points. And I think I was really fascinated to read about this particular woman's story, who started Durga Energy, and she's employed 40 other women in the village. It was extremely hard. Most women were not allowed to be, to be A, working, B, to work for another woman. But you should read her story. She went door to door to convince, and today the company employs 40 women. And you can read about how the stories of different villages are transforming forever. So not only are they producing electricity in a renewable, clean way, but it's creating employment, and especially women employment, which has benefits that kind of percolate downstream. Of course, India is still our median age is 28, 29 years, but I think we got to prepare for the future. If we see what's happening in China, what's already happened in Japan, at some point post 2050, we will have the silver generation to be taken care of. Already I think we may probably know of families or parents. I mean, my own parents, right? They are in their mid 60s, they live alone. I'm the only child, they live in Pune. They're fine so far, but in another 10 years time, they would get to a stage where they would need care. So this is an opportunity to do good as well as to monetize, because you can imagine the opportunity. There are about 37 million NRIs globally right now. I'm sure even if I take a tenth of those who may have old age parents, adults whose parents are old, I think that's a massive opportunity to figure out how can one engage those children to see what kind of services to provide for their respective parents. And here's one company I happen to know, run by one of my cousins in the north, called Imoha, where they're providing not just emergency healthcare services, and I think they've saved so many lives during the pandemic, especially in NCR in during the phase two period, but also to provide emotional support, also to provide e-commerce support, also to provide basic civic services like passport, right? What you and I take for granted. So I think services or products that take care of the aging population, whether it's proactive or reactive, whether it's desires or needs, I think there is massive opportunity there. Number nine, something that's close to my heart, because I'm a big avid sports fan, not just as a sports fan, but also about the business of sports, because I genuinely believe that sports has the power to drive change within an individual through inspiration, or as well as at organizations or societies. And today, whilst popular sports like cricket obviously have a lot going for the sport, I'm talking about Olympics and Paralympic sports and athletes, or even junior level, senior level athletes, as well as administrators, because I think in sports has a commercial benefit. Sports can help build India's imagery and soft power overseas for diplomacy. Sports can also create a lot of employment and a lot of economic opportunities. And I think there is a massive opportunity for companies to come and kind of create platforms that can help scout talent, from grassroots, from villages, because talent exists everywhere. Nurturing that talent, promoting it, and digital narratives that talk about these talents. So for example, right, just last week I read about somewhere on LinkedIn, a badminton player, national level player. She literally put out a note, a very heartfelt note, that she's doing well, but to play in the Paris Olympics she would need corporate support and funding, right? So the question is, can there not be a platform that if someone's genuinely put out a request, can there be a digital platform saying, hey, we've spotted this, let's quickly verify. If true, how can we as quickly as possible crowdfund or corporate fund sponsorship opportunities for that talent, right? So it's not something, again, rocket science, but again, if that particular lady gets that opportunity, even if she gets a bronze medal or doesn't get a medal, if she just gets that opportunity, that creates a flywheel. And I think that's what I'm looking forward to, right? One medal, I mean, look at what's happened to the Olympic contingent this year, or the Paralympic contingent. I mean, it was phenomenal performance by India. But the question is, for every Bhavani Patel, there will be so many others who didn't win. They would need support, and we need to create that grassroots level culture, so that if we have that bench strength, I'm sure our medal count goes up. If our medal count goes up, corporate sponsorships come in, more people take up sport as a habit. It has various benefits. Again, all of these pointers hopefully have both commercial as well as societal and benefits to lives. And there's a company that recently started by Boria Mazumdar from Kolkata, that he's trying to kind of do this, right? He's a journalist, he's a content creator, but now he's come together, and I happen to be an advisor there. We're trying to basically see, can we create a platform for women's sport, for Paralympians and Olympics, through content, commerce, and connections. And lastly, I think when I was thinking about civic, opportunities, I think one area that is, I think, it's amazing. I think when it comes to the rule of law, when it comes to constitution, I think our law, our constitution is very, very powerful. But I think access to justice, access to public legal services, I think we stand at a very poor standing. And again, I think India produces some phenomenal lawyers, but mostly, obviously, for economic reasons, they end up in the corporate side. I think the opportunity is, how do we create or digitize access to public legal services, just like healthcare services, and how do we kind of expedite cases? I mean, in Singapore, Estonia, and smaller countries today, Supreme Court cases all happen through Zoom or equivalent platforms, and there are mechanisms to kind of figure out various other avenues, because every case can't be given the same priority, right? There has to be ways to break things down, figure out priorities, and provide quicker justice, or at least quicker access to justice. And this has to be equitable, because I think this is a fundamental tenet, like education, healthcare. If you saw all my points, they are ultimately pointers about how do we make digital India, or how do we use digital to make India equitable, inclusive, and how do we kind of improve life? Because I think, as I spoke about the unicorns, I think they will ensure that we get clothes and food and medicines and entertainment on our mobile devices as quickly as possible. And that's a good starting point. But I think that philosophy needs to be translated to the fundamental access to the fundamental tenets of life. So that's, essentially my vision for India in terms of digital innovations for the country in the coming decade, if not 2 decades, is really inclusive indigenous innovations that drive impact. That's it from my side. Happy to take any questions if we still do have time. Thank you.
Yeah. So the forum is open for questions. I have received some questions on the personal message. So I will read out for your convenience. First is from Vani. She asks, what would be the optimum stage at which a startup should start adopting to the emerging tech, and how will they know when to adopt a different business model according to the implementation of new tech? Sorry, you're in mute.
Sorry, yeah. So I think, the question of technology probably should be secondary. I think, to me, what's important, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're an intrapreneur in a large company trying to solve the problem, is just like, in science experiments back in the day in school, is to define the problem you want to solve for. I think if you start with technology, you will only solve it's so technology is the hammer, right? So if you start pick up the hammer, you will want to find nails, right? But maybe you don't need a hammer, maybe you need an axe, right? So don't start with the instrument, start with finding the problem. That, are you trying to drill a hole, are you trying to hammer a nail, or are you trying to kind of, excavate something? So find that problem, define it as crystal clear as possible, and then you'll figure out, what tech to use. Now, assuming you've figured out the problem, so for example, let's say you're trying to solve the problem of traffic or parking, right? Which is obviously massive infrastructure challenges in most of our cities. Once you've defined what aspect of the problem you're solving, I think access to technology, access to research is relatively easy. I think we have data banks to figure out. Firstly, you'll want to figure out, hey, has anyone else done it? What are some of their algorithms or their solutions look like, right? So get to technology later. First, conceptualize and frame the problem, right? Figure out the size of the problem. Start small. You can have a grand vision, but break it down into a few smaller problems that you can solve, because you want to build MVPs and you want to build smaller solutions. But in terms of the latest in technology, I think, thanks to the internet, you can quickly research and figure out whether you need to use blockchain, whether you need to use, whether you're going to use a Python solution, whatever that is, you'll figure that out. But don't start with the hammer. Figure out what is the problem you're trying to solve for.
Quite an elaborative answer there. Thank you. The next question is from Pratik. He asked that COVID has throttled the adoption of tech in everyone's life. Currently, it has started becoming a necessity rather than an ad. So, where do you think it will be in the next 5 years?
So you're right. I mean, adoption of technology, I think that's the weird benefit of a pandemic. And I think I'm glad across the world that's been a pattern. So I can only foresee that adoption of technology will only continue to soar, right? And when I say technology, I'm talking about basic, internet. Probably, we get fiber internet. From 4G, we go to 5G. Obviously, India benefits massively from having the lowest cost per GB in the world. I think it's last I checked was about 16 US cents, which is insanely cheap. So I think infrastructure wise, device wise, I think adoption will go up. I think also the capacity of those phones or the smartness of the apps will go up. So to me, I think that will continue going up, and hence, which is fantastic, right? So imagine there comes a day when every 1.3 or whatever billion in India has access to, free or cost effective internet or mobile devices. To me, as that happens, that's the inflection point. Now the question is, what are we going to do with that technology? Sure, happy for us to, create short form TikTok chingari videos and entertain ourselves. Happy for us to watch OTT, Hotstar, Netflix, whatever it is. Happy for us to buy consumer goods. But remember, that's consumption. Consumption is a part of the GDP equation. We need to be able to create for everything that all of us consume. Consumption is the, I suppose, it's important, but it's the lazy part of it, right? But who's going to create that Netflix movie? Who's going to create that next tech solution? That's where the opportunity lies. So I think consumption will continue to rise, but I think where I'm hoping to see more action is on the creation, value creation, job creation, creating solutions that make a positive dent in our lives in some of those 10 pointers that I mentioned.
Next question is from Krishna. So it's an interesting question. He is talking about digitalization in healthcare sector in the rural. So he wants to understand that there are several challenges to extend the technology in the healthcare sector. He talks about two. One, about the infrastructural issue, and second, how to win the trust of masses, especially the rural in this particular segment, to believe on the accuracy of the technology in the healthcare.
Yeah, you're right. I think between the two, to me, the second challenge is a bigger one. I think not just rural, but I think no human likes change. So suddenly, if someone is, used to going to a physical doctor or a hospital, there is perceptual value to seeing a doctor in a white coat, right? You suddenly start respecting that person. Uh, so yes, it is a challenge. So, but I think what we have seen is whether with a lot of the government services that I spoke about earlier, whether it's Aadhaar linked or your bank account services or your COVID, MyGov chatbot. I think if there is utility, if there is cost effective utility, it takes time, right? Whether you're building a app like Zomato, humans are by definition skeptical. They'll take away my money. What if I put my credit card? They'll do this, right? It's right. That's human nature. We are by definition, most of us are skeptics. But that's where the entrepreneur comes in, who is eternally optimist. He or she will need to understand why someone doesn't trust. Is it, are they worried about money? Are they worried about privacy? And I think once you kind of double click into the problem as to why people are not trusting, you will find small ways to kind of solve for that. And I think the beauty of all of this is, especially healthcare. If you can save lives, if a person sees that you have saved his or her mother or child, there is no bigger benefit. So it's important to get it right. But if you get it right, I think more than a Zomato or a Paytm or a Nykaa, I think word will spread that, boss, sitting in a village, something happened on this device and my child was saved because the doctor asked me to give him this goli or that teacup, right? So the positive word of mouth could happen. Yes, the negative could also happen, because every solution, there will be some deaths because of negligence or because of just nature, and that could have a repercussion as well. So yes, and that's where regulations will kick in, will have to come in. But all I will say is, if you're an entrepreneur, jot all the problems down, be skeptic, be a devil's advocate, but don't let that stop you from dreaming. Because it doesn't matter what solution you're creating, you will find your mother or your friend and say, hey, ye nahi chalega. Here are 100 reasons why this won't work. If you find one or two reasons why it'll work, go for it.
Thank you, sir. That was really very igniting. Thanks for igniting that spark of entrepreneurship in us and also giving us direction to start thinking on the right track. So, coming towards the end of the session, we have a small video from our sponsors, which I would like you all guys to enjoy. Just give me a second.
Post a new job and receive responses within 5 minutes. For a verified recruiter, posting a job can be done with a click of a button. Recruiters don't have to wait for candidates to apply. Candidate profiles are recommended based on the job post, and recruiters can start communicating with the recommended candidates immediately after posting the job. Privacy of the users is also protected. Personal information like phone number, CVs are shared only with consent. The communication can either be initiated by the recruiter or the candidate. In my case, you can see within 5 minutes of posting the job, the recruiter could chat directly, receive responses quickly, and even schedule interviews with the candidates. Within a few minutes, the recruiter can start expecting more candidates to view the job post and reach out to them by initiating a chat conversation. Since Hirect is mobile first, responses pour in any time of the day as most people are within the vicinity of their phone. A few hours later, as you can see here, a product manager job post was added by me last night, and by morning I have already received 15 plus chat requests from job seekers. You can see that my feed is full of product managers from top institutes and companies as matched by the algorithm. I'm able to initiate a chat with them and receive a response quickly, as I can see their last active time as well. Recruiters can receive responses from job seekers irrespective of the time of day or even at night, as Hirect is mobile first, and this makes it very accessible to the users. Direct chat, mobile accessibility, instant response, matching algorithm, secured privacy makes it 5 times better product for recruiters.
That was a video from our sponsors. I would like to close the session extending my gratitude towards the Pratik sir for joining us today in the Genesis. I will also like to thank all the audience to be there. Thanks.